Thursday, it's going to be an epic clash between Scott Frost and Charles Kelly. What's going to give?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend Andrew Gluchov to talk a little UCF football here. We're recording this on a Friday night, and when you listen to this, it might be Saturday morning, but that's okay. UCF football whenever you need it. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Scott Frost versus former Auburn defensive coordinator Charles Kelly, who is taking over Jacksonville State as the head coach. We're going to talk about protecting Cam Fancher and then the importance of winning game one here for UCF. Let's start at the top. Scott Frost versus Charles Kelly, the former Auburn defensive coordinator, leaves Auburn. He was like co-defensive coordinator there. I covered him, so I know quite a bit there about Mr. Charles Kelly. And Andrew, look, Charles Kelly is a great defensive mind. There are a lot of people who have come into our comment section, UCF fans, reminding us that we cannot take this matchup for granted. This is not a matchup that can be taken for granted. Now, I picked this game with our friend James Duncan earlier this week on the show. And I've got UCF winning this game, but maybe not covering that 18-point spread. You know, what are your thoughts here on this matchup between the great offensive mind that is Scott Frost and the wonderful defensive mind that is Charles Kelly?
Well, I mean, as you know from watching football from time immemorial, it's easier to install a simple defense than it is to install a simple offense. It just, if you do the basic fundamentals, you knock the ball away, you rush the quarterback. It doesn't require as much nuance. However, Scott Frost does not run a simple offense. He runs, tempo. He runs, a spread offense. And now that we've got the quarterback situation taken care of, now we can look at other things such as this. One of the things that you have to look at is by holding things tight to the vest about a week till game time. It's forced the Jacksonville State staff to kind of start game planning for all three. Well, now they can narrow it down to one quarterback, Cam Fancher, who's the dual threat of the group. Now, UCF historically has struggled against dual threat quarterbacks on their side, but dual threats have usually done pretty well for UCF as well, even, some scrappy ones. Coming from the McKenzie Milton school of quarterbacking, I think Fancher will not have an overly complicated offense to run just because they're, even though he's been running with the ones for a while, it still takes time to install this stuff. I think Kelly on the other side is still, his people are still installing their offense and even probably to a certain extent their defense. But as I said before, it's easier to install a base defense than it is to put this offense together. And as long as you have the people to make it work, and that's where I think Jacksonville State's going to struggle a bit, is they lost some key people when Rich Rodriguez left for West Virginia. And, last year, Jacksonville State was conference champion. You look anywhere and it's like, yeah, we don't see that happening again. They lost too much. And there's a lot of unproven here. Even though that UCF has a lot of unproven themselves, you have the benefit of the home crowd. UCF's home field advantage is not to be taken for granted. This is a fan base that can get loud. This is a stadium that's built for noise. You have a steel-based stadium that reverbs that sound. And, I've been to games where, there are people hitting the bleachers and, and the seat backs and they're getting loud because it's metal seats, it's going to make noise. And, they can cause a lot of false start penalties or communication issues. I don't know if Jacksonville State's truly ready for that. Yeah, and I'm making it sound like this is the Death Valley, but let's turn the way back time machine. 2018 when UCF hosted Cincinnati, and that game was on primetime, and Cincinnati was just completely caught off guard by how loud the fans were to get that game started, and there were a bunch of early penalties. I would not be surprised if we see something similar to that, where the Jacksonville State offense gets thrown off by the crowd. And then that in tune helps energize the other way, because they're going to allow the UCF offense to get to work. And the more that the Jacksonville State offense struggles, the more that defense is going to be pushed with that tempo. So what Kelly's going to have to do is he's going to have to be very opportunistic with his rotations. He's not, if the clock is running, UCF's running. They're going to move to the line. They're going to, try to snap the ball with, 24 seconds, 20 seconds left on the play clock. They're going to be moving fast, and, maybe 15, but that's still pretty quick. That's not enough time if UCF's not making any substitutions to do any substitutions yourself. So you have you run into the risk of having 12 men on the field, or an offside penalty, or something to that effect. The fans are already joking, oh, we're going to see some fake injuries. Well, as you know, the NCAA has been going after the fake injuries. They're trying to make it more and more punitive against the team faking the injury. So I don't know if we'll see fake injuries so much, but we're going to definitely see Scott Frost attempting to make this defense a little bit flat-footed on those plays that the clock's running, and so is the team.
Yeah, look, this game has been described by some as maybe a little bit of a baptism by fire in game one, a game that UCF should win, but could present some challenges. Now, I can tell you, just like 27 minutes ago, somebody left a comment on our videos about not overlooking Jacksonville State, and what that could potentially mean for them. But like it's a game that's on everybody's radar right now. The comment in particular says, and this is by Coffee Sun. So Coffee Sun, if you're watching, we're reading your comment live. He says, what happens if UCF loses to Jacksonville State? After the Gus bus, anything is possible. We lost our growing national image under Gus. UCF must do more with less. And look, the last part of that, I do agree. You got to do more with less here in year one. Now, that's not a knock on the athletes that are here. I feel like there's talent on this football team, so I don't want to be disrespectful to the guys that are on the team. But you certainly, I think this game will tell you how a little bit, are you closer to maybe middle of the pack of the Big 12, or are you closer to like just barely competing with the top FCS team or something? You understand what I'm saying? Like,
well, I mean, this isn't Kent State we're talking about.
Yeah, right.
It's not that low, but UCF's routinely being picked between like 13th and 16th in the conference, and I think that's a fair place to put them.
Yeah. Like somebody else said, Drake Toll picked us last in the Big 12, so that's a good sign for him.
Drake Toll's taking it out on you because you're not on the squad show.
He picked ASU last year, so that might be a good sign that UCF is picked last. But look, this game is going to be a lot about quarterback. Everybody's going to be watching quarterback, and they're going to be watching Cam Fancher. He was named QB1 earlier this week. We reported on that well before it happened, saying that he was leading the race. So ended up being right there. But we're going to talk about protecting Cam Fancher and what that's going to mean to the UCF offense versus Jacksonville State right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Rougiette. That's right, Rougiette, guys. Look, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. So if you're on a date, and the boom boom is about to happen, just pop a Rougiette right before you get home, and you should be ready to go in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can have lots of fun for a day and a half and stay confident in control and in the moment. Head on over to Rougiette.com/lockedon and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off. That's Rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. Use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compound drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for a full safety information. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Protecting Cam Fancher. UCF must protect Cam Fancher. Look, the touchdown to interception ratio was not looking great on the stat sheet at FAU. But he was named QB1. There's been a lot of talk this week about what his leash will actually be. Scott Frost left the door open. The other QBs could see the field here in game one. But none of us really know under what scenario that could happen. Let's say UCF is blowing out Jacksonville State. I think we see one of the other QBs in the third quarter, if that should be the case. But I don't think it's a good idea to have your starting QB looking over his shoulder game one. So what do you see here? I mean, they've got to protect them. This offensive line has to step up. We did our two deep on the offensive line. You and I did. So I just want to remind everybody what that looks like here. Paul Rubelt at left tackle, protecting the blind side of the quarterback. Center Carter Miller. We've got guard Memolar at left guard. And we've got Preston Cushman at right tackle and right guard Keegan Smith. These are the guys who are going to be going up and protecting Cam Fancher so that hopefully he can do more of what he did in 2023 and less of what he did in 2024. But we want to see that completion percentage in the mid to high 60s and not sub 60 like he was last year at FAU.
Yeah, well, remember, FAU was a bad team up and down. Now, this is a much more talented team around him, better offensive line, better running backs, better receivers. I mean, better tight, just better all around. And I think that's going to help out. You got to make smart decisions. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Throw the ball away. Be willing to take a sack. It's better than a turnover. You've got to play smart football. And we've seen where he's done it. We've seen where he's not. If you look at his per game box scores over the last few years, the problem with Cam Fancher is that consistency factor. But you look at the other guys, and you're not seeing consistency either. That's the problem. So this is kind of like the best of the rest, really. This is a bridge year. The hope is that you're bringing a guy like Kane Archer and Dante Carr in next year to compete, and possibly even supplant any holdovers, or you get another 1 year rental as they develop and catch up to the speed of the game. It's hard to say how that's going to play out, but in the meantime, it's worth noting, Cam Fancher is a southpaw. He's left-handed. So your blind side is going to be your right guard, your right tackle. So you talk about, Cushman and Smith. Those guys are going to have to protect the blind side for Fancher. And then you'll have Rubelt on the left side, anchoring what should be, a good run game. You got, unfortunately, down to three very talented running backs. Hopefully someone else kind of slides in and carries a little bit there too. But I mean, between Nixon, Montgomery, and Gage, you got a good running game that will take it. That'll take some pressure off Fancher. The key is UCF cannot fall behind, by more than a couple touchdowns, or else it's Fancher's going to have to carry this team, and I don't think that's not what they want to do. It's not a safe position to be in for a player that's a little bit turnover prone. Yeah, you want to be able to grind it out. You want to be able to use those running backs, bring in the box, have them stack it and then go over the top. That's something that Scott Frost relishes on is, you have those good multi-layered running backs that can go inside and outside, and it forces the defense to commit enough to the run that you can get that one-on-one outside coverage, downfield and hit that outside shoulder on a good fly route or something to that extent. Those one-on-one receiver matchups are going to be huge, but it all comes down to, will Fancher get enough time to make these plays happen? And again, as a southpaw, that right guard, right tackle combination is paramount to making sure he gets enough time to do something.
Yeah, look, this is a physical Jacksonville defensive front that they're going to be going up against. So while UCF is very heavily favored in the betting, this is going to be a test. It's going to be an early test, and it's got one where they just have to keep their composure. As you mentioned, they'll have the crowd on their side. They're going to have the home environment in their favor, Andrew. And you just got to put all that together and give Fancher a real chance to go out there and get warmed up and get settled into the game and get comfortable. And I think that's got to be the name of the game if you're Scott Frost, is get your QB1 comfortable. So that, again, he is not looking over his shoulder. But look, what kind of importance should we be putting on game one for Scott Frost and his Knights? We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. August 26th is officially FanDuel's Future Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. I place a bet preseason on a certain college football team to win the national title every year. I can proudly say I have never won that bet. But you might win yours if you bet today. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion week one before it even kicks off, this is your moment. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Andrew, what kind of importance, what is the importance of game one in your mind? In my mind, this is about setting the tempo. This is about displaying the culture that you built all offseason. I had a director of football operations explain the offseason to me this way, and it always stuck with me. He said, Mike, it's 1,000 hours of work in the offseason, of practice, of weightlifting, of training, for 40 hours of football in the fall. 1,000 hours of work for 40 hours of football. We're going to get the first 3 or 4 hours of football here on August 28th here when UCF and Jacksonville State square off. But I think this is an important game. It's one UCF should win. Look, James Duncan had UCF covering. I got UCF winning 33-20 in this one. I just feel like there's going to be a garbage time touchdown. I think James had them 33-13 in this one. So I'm going to get your score prediction from you here in a second. But look, you got to set the culture. You have to set the tone in this game. And as I mentioned, this will be a physical Jacksonville defensive front. And if you're UCF, you need to go out and your offensive line needs to control the pace of this game. Get Myles Montgomery and Jaden Nixon going. Let Cam Fancher get some comfortable handoffs, get the feel for being out there. And then when he goes back into that play action and drops back for his first pass, just be accurate and be on time. I think this game holds a significance in, if you win it the right way, not just win it, if you win it the right way, you have a chance to prove a lot of your doubters wrong about the ceiling of this football team.
Well, let's put into perspective. UCF has not lost a season opener since 2015. Despite Gus Malzahn kind of falling flat in his face, the team never lost an opener. Scott Frost does not want to break that streak. That's not the way to win friends and influence people. A lot of fans have very muted expectations of this year. However, they do not expect to lose the opener. So if you want to have fans turn on you quick, go lose the game. Yeah. If you want to instill some confidence, not only in the players, but in the fans, because you need those fans behind you. You got to win. And even if it's within the spread, you've got to win. At the end of the day, it's wins and losses. The rest is style points. UCF doesn't need to have style points right now. They're not playing for a national championship. We all know it. Yeah, it's just, that we're being reasonable in that. Even to say they're not even playing for a conference championship. There's a number of good teams in the Big 12. It's going to take UCF a little bit of time to lick the wounds of the regime change and how things kind of fell apart in 2024. So at this point, it's just, survive in advance. Just win the game. Get some exposure to some of these players. Allow them to gel together. Work on some chemistry. And don't make stupid mistakes. Try to avoid the injury bug, and set yourself up for week 2. Now, granted, week 2 is against a softer opponent in North Carolina A&T, but that doesn't mean you can overlook anybody. Every game has value to it. Has something that it can offer you, either chance to go through the motions and try new things, or tighten up, or get new players on the field, during, garbage time. As far as the score goes, I think UCF will ultimately cover this. I do not think it's going to be enough of a blowout for the other, second stringers to come in. I think like a 31-10 game would be a reasonable score. This is, even though the defense has had a lot of changes, especially in like linebacker, this is still a very talented group. The defensive backs are very strong. The defensive line's very strong. And after the struggles they had in the first half of last year, where they had hurries but could never sack the quarterback, these guys are hungry. And the fact that they've upgraded, you've got 3 really talented players on the edge with Nigel E, Kelly, Malachi Lawrence, and Sincere Edwards. And then you have Isaiah Nixon on as the 4th guy. You're going to have a lot of pressure on the edge, which is the easiest way to break down that pocket. I think they're going to throw, force Jacksonville to throw the ball, and it's going to create a lot of fits. And I think the offense is for the Gamecocks is going to struggle, and that's only going to just fuel the fans there, because they're looking to start the new era on a positive note and start the turnaround. We've talked about how UCF needs to get to 6-6. Well, you need to start with positive momentum. The team knows it, the fans know it, and I think they make it happen.
I think they make it happen too. Got to hold your feet to the fire here. Give me a score.
31-10.
31-10. Andrew Gluchov, you heard him here first. He has the Knights covering that 18-point spread. Man, I'm really on an island here, thinking that this is I feel like there's gonna be a garbage time touchdown that's gonna get them inside the spread. I could see that happening, like UCF's up 20, and then they march down the field when the 3rd string is in at the end of the game, and get.
I don't think 3rd string is going to be in if that game is only a 3 touchdown game. I don't think that's going to be enough to move them around. Weird things happen, man. That 3 touchdown score is not safe.
It is not safe. But look, either way, we'll be safely covering it. You on site for Locked On UCF and UCF Night Zone, where you can find all our written work. But look, guys, Andrew, I want to thank you for joining me today. Andrew Gluchov, a.k.a. Statboy Drew, senior writer at UCFKnightZone.com. Please go check out his written work there. You can check out my written work there as well, too. And our contributor, James Duncan, will be contributing from time to time. Please go support us over on the website, guys. We are growing coverage for you, and we appreciate all your patronage. That's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at The Portal Show. Our guy Brian Smith has the latest in portal rumors, signings, all the going-ons in college football right there in one place for you on The Portal Show. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.